Nosy neighbors and curious coworkers. When people use proximity to display their jealousy and envy and all out disdain for you. You see, there are some people, they assume just because they're your neighbor, because they're your coworker, because you might run in the same social circles, they assume that that automatically gives you access or automatically gives them access. And they start overstepping boundaries. See, when you're dealing with a nosy neighbor, when you're dealing with neighbors who feel like they're entitled to know all your business simply because they're your neighbor, that is a problem. And when you deny them that access, that's when things can get very crazy. Things can often get dangerous. See, there are some people, when they're your neighbor and they assume that you all are the same, but you're not, they start getting curious and assuming certain things. And when you deny them the opportunity to get into your business, that's when you become their enemy. You have some neighbors, and I had a friend who was going through this, where the neighbor was actually throwing dog stuff over into her yard. He was actually destroying her garbage. She would put the garbage out and he would put slits in there and mess it all up so that in the morning, the animals and everything have attacked her garbage and it just looks like a mess. He was even listening on her walls as she was speaking. She knew he was doing that because she could hear the sudden silence. She could just tell. You see, the issue is that she didn't want to talk to this man. She took him as creepy. She got a bad vibe from him, and she didn't want to be bothered with him. And he picked up on that. And then suddenly he started getting at her. He started being very negative. He would stop, just being cordial because she was fine with that. She was fine with the hellos, good mornings, and it started to get into him staring at her. He would be on his porch, she's on her porch, and he's just staring at her in a very aggressive way. You see, when people think they have proximity to you and that automatically means access, when you deny them that, they start getting upset. See, they're so nosy, they're so curious, they assume that you have to accept them because you're the neighbor. I have to talk to you. I have to allow you into my house for coffee or tea. I have to do this or that. See, people who are nosy and want to get into your business to somehow compare how you live to them, especially when you have proximity. And a little bit of a sidebar, but it's something about people, and this doesn't go for all neighbors or all situations. Thankfully for myself, I have great neighbors. We see each other in our comings and goings. We are very cordial, but we are not in each other's business. But when you have environments where you have neighbors who feel like they're trying to fill you out, they're trying to figure out, how are you living here in the same neighborhood where I am? And you see, you have some people, even your neighbors, they get very jealous and envious of the fact, and I'm going to be real because we talk real on this channel, when you don't look like you specifically belong in a certain neighborhood, or maybe you might not fit the aesthetic of a certain neighborhood, and I think you all know what I mean, that triggers jealousy and envy in some of your neighbors. They're trying to figure out, how are you living in this neighborhood? How are you able to afford to live here? What do you do for a living? How do you drive this nice car? I see different people go in and out of your house. Who are they? They get very caught up in your business and they start assuming the worst. And then when you don't want to give them your business because you're not obligated to, that's when they start trying to make life hard for you. See, nosy neighbors, curious coworkers, they all have something in common. They try to get into your business, and a lot of them, when you don't give them your business, they start assuming, they start getting jealous, they start showing their envy and their jealousy towards you. It's all because you refuse to cross the line. See, neighbors, and for me, when me and my husband was looking for a home, I deliberately told him, and I'm not knocking anybody who has an attached house or a row home or anything like that, but I deliberately told him that I did not want a row home. I don't want to hear somebody else's conversations on my walls. We lived in apartments for years and it was torture. You smelling all kinds of smoke. You are hearing conversations. You're hearing arguments and tussling. I didn't want that. So thankfully, we have a standalone house where I'm not hearing stuff on the walls. But when we did have apartments, We had people who would overhear some of the conversations we had, and they had the audacity in the morning to ask me about certain things as if it was a normal thing to be in somebody's business in that way. While this is a little bit of a sidebar, it does meet the point. I refuse to get into those conversations with those people. Do you know those people started mistreating me? They went from smiling at me and the kids to looking at me like I was their enemy, all because I would not allow them into my business. I actually overheard one of the women say, "Oh, she think her kids is so and so. She thinks she this. Ain't nobody worrying about her. Ain't nobody worrying about them kids." See, it's all because they assume that because you're in that environment, you are the same and that you're obligated to give them something that you're not. When people believe that proximity automatically entitles them to your information, to your business, and you don't give them that, they will become your enemies and they can grow very jealous and envious of you. They start assuming that you think you're better than them simply because you don't want to give them your business. And another raw statement, I know everybody might not like it, but it is what it is. When you live in the inner cities, when you live in the hood, sometimes you'll have people who think just because you're new to the neighborhood or you're in the neighborhood that automatically you're going to fit along with everybody else, that you're going to start, being a part of the block parties and, contributing to this and contributing to that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that, but you have to fill out the vibe and fill out the people. In many inner cities, in many, let's just say how it is, ghetto, ratchet neighborhoods, there's typically people who are up to no good. And those people are typically the ones who make nice, act like they're your friend, and as soon as they get a lot of your business, they turn on you. When they start realizing that you're living different than they are, you might just be here, but you're not really in that life. This is just a stepping stone. Maybe you have a lot more money than what they thought you did. Now they're a hater. Now they're jealous and envious of you. It's because you let them in. Nosy neighbors will automatically assume that they have access to you, that they are entitled to know your business. And if you are naive enough to give that to them, they will use it against you. When it comes to dealing with nosy neighbors, those who get envious and jealous and they're trying to figure out, how are you here? Either how are you in this neighborhood? You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood, or you look like you shouldn't be here. So what is it about this neighborhood? Like, why are you here? It's like people, especially if you're in the inner city, people who get jealous and envious of others quickly, they become haters. They can tell when you have a little bit more than the others. And this is not about class or thinking you're better. This is about keeping it real. When you are a woman who is, maybe you have a great job, maybe you have a nice car, you have access to different things than what your environment warrants, but you're just in that environment. There are going to be some people, if they're curious, nosy, intrusive, and easily angered and frustrated when you don't want to communicate with them, they're going to start picking up on the fact that you don't belong here. And they're going to look at you as the girl that automatically thinks she's better. And you are not obligated to communicate or give your information to people that you don't want to vibe with. You don't have to be friends with your neighbors just because they're your neighbors. And I understand the looking out part, the camaraderie, all of that. But some people don't want that. They want to be close to you so they can make issues for you. When they realize that you live different than they do, it's going to be a problem. And even if you don't, if your mindset is different, if you're not sitting outside all times of night wanting to drink and card parties and all this other stuff, you don't do all of that, you're not interested in that, they will have a problem with you if you let them in. When it comes to dealing with nosy, jealous, envious neighbors, you need to make sure that you keep everything vague and keep them out your business. See, people, as they say, you give them an inch and they'll take a mile. And when you're dealing with jealous, envious neighbors who are always trying to figure you out and they assume that proximity automatically equals closeness, when you don't give them that, if you allow them to cross that line a little bit too much, they will take a mile in your life. Nosy neighbors and curious coworkers. Coworkers who get curious about you and they see that you move a little bit different, that you spend your money differently, that you come into the office with fast food or things that you picked up from a deli or from a salad shop or what have you. Sometimes those people will get very jealous and envious because they assume if you all work at the same place, then you should all spend the same. Everybody's life is different. And I think for haters, for people who easily get jealous of other people, when they assume that proximity automatically means that you all are the same, not that anyone should be checking for that, but let's be real. There are some people, when they assume that proximity equals closeness, they start assuming that everybody's the same. And then they start getting nosy, trying to figure out, well, we work at the same job. I'm a cashier too. How are you able to afford that? They start getting jealous, getting nosy. God forbid you're a wife or a woman that just works part-time, not because you have to, but because you want to, or get a little extra change. But you have a husband, you have support. Maybe you have a business. None of that stuff is their business. But nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, they like to make assumptions until you tell them what's going on. And you are not obligated to tell them anything. And I know many of you already know this, but I have to say it. Your coworkers are not your friends. That is not to say that you can't have, just general conversations about your kids and just how they're doing. They graduated, wonderful. But when you start getting into the inner workings of your life, your finances, your relationship status, your health issues, those kind of things are off limits. You see, nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, people who get easily angered and triggered to jealousy and envy based on the things you tell them, you have to fill them out to make sure it's safe for you to share certain information with them. For me personally, somebody I'm going to see every day at work, I can't talk to you about my finances. I can't talk to you about my relationship when I'm having really bad issues. Because some people, they get very curious because they want to see bad things about you. People who are jealous and envious of others, it makes you feel almost more human to them when they can pick out something bad about you. And I know that might sound weird, but some people that are jealous and envious, they don't really see you as human if you're not going through anything or if you're not constantly talking about going through things. You see, people who are jealous and envious and they get nosy and curious about you, if you don't talk about bad things happening to you all the time, or you're not constantly complaining about the struggles you go through, if you're not wearing your struggles, your issues like a badge of honor, it's almost like that dehumanizes you in the eyes of a hater, in the eyes of a jealous person. It's like they need to know that you're as down bad as them, or at least you can identify with the down badness. I know that's not a word, but that's kind of how they act. It's like the moment you are just being optimistic and you are just, you're dealing with your situation. It's your situation, nobody's business. That's not good enough to nosy neighbors and curious coworkers. And people who are determined, they're intent on finding out the personal details of your life because they feel like they're obligated because they're close in proximity, not in relationship. These people can be very draining to deal with. It's like they're always trying to pick apart what you're doing. Nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, when groups assume proximity means closeness, they can get very envious, very jealous when you don't give them access to your personal business. So what do? Let's say you've already crossed the line into giving jealous, envious people too much of your information and they feel like they really know you. What you can do is, starting today, is to backtrack off of some of the things that you have said. If they bring up certain things that you said by having mouth diarrhea, you said too much, gradually stop talking about those things. If they bring up, how are you and your husband doing? Is everything okay with his job now? Is everything okay with your job now? Everything is great. Thank you. And leave it at that. You don't have to get into what he's doing now. You don't have to get into what changed. Just start answering in very vague ways. That is setting the tone for more privacy. You see, people who assume that they automatically should have your information, and don't feel bad if you were tricked into giving them more than what you should have, because we all have kind of been taught that in order to be a good neighbor, in order to be a good friend, in order to be a good person, you must give out all of yourself to other people. Not until you mature as a woman do you realize that doing that sometimes with the wrong people, because if you're around people you trust, people you know, I'm not saying there's never a time where you can't be open and transparent with decent people. But if you have given a hater, a jealous, envious person who in turn wants to use that information against you, you have to start gradually course correcting how you deal with them. So give them vague answers, and then stop talking so much about personal things. When you're sitting outside on your porch and you're talking to the neighbor, make sure that you're talking about things that are general. Look, there's so many things going on in the world right now. Surely you can find things to talk about other than yourself. You could talk about the state of our world. You could talk about the weather, the seasons, God. There are things to talk about other than your personal business. People who also, and this is another thing you'll see with nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, these conversations are often one-sided. See, people who are nosy and when they get information, they start treating you badly, getting a little jealous and envious, acting negative towards you. These conversations are often one-sided. And women who mean well and have the best of intentions and are just being a normal person, you don't even realize that you've been doing most of the talking. You have given them just about everything short of your social security number to this person, and they have yet to say anything about them. You can tell when people are being shady and nosy and a little bit suspicious when they're hearing everything about you and they have said nothing really about themselves. If they start speaking to you in general terms, but you didn't given them all of your details, and then when you ask them something, it's good, everything is great, I can't complain. Wait a minute, I emptied my heart to you. And then later on, these people just randomly bring things up. Nosy neighbors, curious coworkers, when they assume that proximity automatically equals closeness, you will find yourself giving people the sword, the ammunition to use against you. And you don't want that. Not saying there's never a time where you can't be transparent with certain people, but let's be real. There are some people, they have ill intentions. And you can tell that by how they press and press and press to get into your business. Nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, for me, I only give people what I want them to know, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes that's nothing at all, depending on the people. For me, I'm thankful for my neighbors, the people I have around me, they're decent people. And in part, that's because they're not in my business. They see different things. If something, I see an ambulance in front of their door, I'll say, is everything okay? We've had incidents, they saw an ambulance in front of my door, is everything okay? I respect that, I honor that. But if you see me outside talking and then you asking me what I'm talking about, that's a little bit nosy, but I digress. Nosy neighbors and curious coworkers, move smart. Be more private. Don't give them more than what you need to. And remember that sometimes giving people too much information, that just triggers that jealousy and envy towards you. Because half the times they're trying to figure out, how are you here? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? Haters and jealous people, they have nothing else better to do than try to figure other people out. Don't give them too much than what they already need to know. All right? Like and subscribe to the channel and share this content. Hit the notification bell so that you're aware when I post a brand new video. If you watch this video until the very end, put the high heel emoji in the comment section. I absolutely love to see it. Take care.